recorded live.
Welcome and thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Approaching midlife and finding as you reflect back on your life, did you ever actually achieve the brass ring that was promised to you? Sometimes the question is it just one brass ring and then do we miss the opportunity to reach and grab for it when it was in front of us? Or are there several brass rings? Or when we actually capture this brass ring that we believe it is, and it turns out not to be what it thought it was, do we get a second chance to maybe go back around and do it again? Well, on the Beyond 50 radio program, we're going to find out a little bit about what this American dream of chasing and grabbing onto that brass ring actually looks like, and maybe the opportunity to reboot, if you will, just in case what you reached for just quite wasn't what you were expecting. The Real Brass Ring is the title of the book. Joining us here on the Beyond 50 radio program today, our guest, Dianne Bischoff James. Dianne, how are the brass rings treating you these days?
Hi, Daniel. The brass rings are fantastic, I must say. Had an absolutely tremendous year, so thank you for asking.
Now, it's really interesting because what comes through in your book is just that feeling of, why was I chasing some of these things that I thought were going to fulfill my life, just not panning out the way I thought they would?
Absolutely. I was one of those individuals who actually thought at the time that I had all the brass rings lined up and in this perfect order, and I consider myself to be an excellent soldier because I did everything that they told me to do. I was instructed since I was a kid. I had very, very strong parents, German background and Irish background, and, we were told to pretty much go after what the Kardashians are going after, all the ring and the bling and the big stuff and the big homes, big possessions. Had to get the master's degree, which I did from Northwestern, and I ended up being very fortunate, had my own business, and I was able to pile on the possessions. I had kind of a mini mansion across from the lake in Chicago, and continued to follow all the instructions. I was told I had to get married by a certain date, and that's exactly what I did. I was told you got to have kids, and you got to cart them around everywhere from morning, noon, night, and then and beyond, and contribute and always be volunteering for everything and just keep yourself on that little hamster wheel. And I did all that, so I thought that I was like the perfect example of what the American dream looked like. You get all the stuff, and you get all the people around you, and you're supposed to be deliriously happy. But what happened to me is I went for, on my 38th birthday, I gave myself a gift. And I thought it would just be kind of fun to go see Sonia Choquette, who is an internationally known psychic. And, I thought she was going to tell me, sister, you're on track, everything's great, everything's fantastic. And instead, for an hour in her office, at the time she had it in a home in Chicago, I went to sit in her office, and she completely undressed me. She took off every layer of everything I had accomplished and told me nothing about my life was my own, and that I had to hurry up and grab at the real brass ring before it was going to be completely too late.
Now, you talked about this mansion that you had by the lake. This was your dream home. Well, it didn't turn out that way, did it?
Well, the house was pretty nice,
yeah.
And I really did like it from a materialistic perspective, but the funny thing is that, they don't tell you that there's this laundry list of expenses. I mean, I was so Pollyanna, it was crazy. I thought that, you get the big house and you can get yourself in there, but I did not have any idea that every other week something huge was going to break down, and that's kind of what happens. You get a leak. We basically had the back stairs kind of flowing into the basement, and then we had the floods, and then we had, everything in the house that could break did break. So it was 100% the money pit once we got it. Now, it was beautiful and still is probably one of my very favorite properties I've ever owned, but somebody's got to pay for that stuff, Daniel. And that's the part that's, that's really interesting because it became like almost a snowball effect. You had not only the mortgage, but then we thought, the recession will, of course, never come. And, lo and behold, there we were, trying to just hang on for dear life in 09, 10, and 11. And that was one giant avalanche that was looking at us financially. So all the business that I had pretty much dried up overnight. Mm-hmm. So on top of everything else, I was told, and this was just one of our many issues, I was also hugely overweight at the time when I saw Sonia, and I was like 190 pounds. Mm-hmm. And she told me, you're clinically depressed. And I had never told anybody, but at the time I was popping Prozacs every day just to kind of get through because I couldn't deal with the sadness and the dark cloud that was over my head, and just being able to function and maintain what I had created made me absolutely 100% miserable. And so I was walking around this miserable person with these huge responsibilities, who was working day and night and had not even the right partner at the time, because we had a marriage, but it was very much fraternal. It was not a heartfelt relationship. So we were working it like the butler and the maid 24/7, mm-hmm. and that was about it.
Yeah, it doesn't leave a whole lot of time for a smile, does it?
No, it was. But for some reason, you get on that little track. You get on that
mm-hmm.
hamster wheel track, and then the challenge is, how do you get off?
Mm-hmm. And it's such a fascinating thing to reflect on, too, as we've talked about this many times on our program, is that, by the time we're getting into our 40s and our 50s, we start really questioning pretty much the path that we've taken, at least most of us do. We certainly become inspired with a tear in our eye when we hear a story or see a movie that is about a true story inspired by real-life events, and you realize sometimes the trials and tribulations somebody takes to get to that end. For instance, one movie comes to mind, which is The Pursuit of Happiness, the one starring Will Smith. And what I enjoyed about that was the fact that it went on and on and on about what seemed to be that journey, rather than just instantly, because they decided to do it, they were going to get everything they wanted. That really, it is a step-by-step process, but truly, as I know you came to understand, is that really was the brass ring, was the journey itself, not in achieving the goal, but in the pursuit of that goal, the pursuit of happiness.
Well, that's absolutely correct. And I always find it interesting when, most of us have the reflection around 40 or so. Mine happened to be at 38. And the question is this really where I ended up? Is this really what I have right now? Do I really have nothing right? Could I possibly be this old and have completely messed the whole thing up? And that was the part that kind of took me down emotionally. I couldn't believe someone sat there and told me, wrong relationship, wrong house, wrong career, wrong everything. The only thing I probably had done right is to have my children. Mm-hmm. And everything else was 100% had to be recrafted. So I didn't have like a mini reboot to do. I had a mega macro reboot to do on every single solitary level. The physical and the emotional and even the mental, and that I was not in the right career, although my career was successful. And then she said, "Oh, by the way, you can be a performer." She goes, "I'm telling you, you can go back to stage," something that I'd always loved to do, but I shut it down. I was the high school musical superstar. And then I was told that was a lousy career by my, the messages that I had growing up is, you don't pursue anything that you love to do. You don't pursue anything that's creative, because that's not going to get you, what are you going to do? How are you going to feed your kids? And the truth is, it may not be a lucrative career, but it was very fulfilling in the heart. So it wasn't until I had that fateful encounter that I had the chance to say, okay, really, who am I? Really, what do I want? And how do I change every single aspect of my life without taking everybody down with me? Mm-hmm. Because it's one thing to say, oh, you're in the wrong partnership, but it's another thing to have 3 little kids staring at you in the big mini mansion, knowing that you've got to continue to feed those people. I didn't get to run off like Eat, Pray, Love and go sit in some ashram for a year and a half and have some lovely romantic relationships. Right. I'm sorry, there's kids here. there's 2 dogs and a cat and a fish and a horse. We had everything going on, and it was, it was insanity. Kind of what she said to me at the time seemed almost hopeless and insane. Mm-hmm.
Now, I know that you did love being in theater, and you began to pursue that. And what's really fascinating is to see that you were kind of surprised by how there were these serendipitous moments that led you in directions and fulfilled you in ways that you just really couldn't imagine because of that sort of conditioning about, well, that isn't what you should be doing. It doesn't pan out, the starving artist and all that. So you want to go and do the responsible thing like the lawyer, the doctor, whatever the case is there. But you can see how following a path with heart opens up the possibilities where life, as well as you, begin to say yes.
Yeah, that's absolutely completely correct. I had so many moments when, well, first of all, I decided to take everything in, I'd say more of a safe approach. I decided to start with community theater because I don't think I had the confidence. I was still grossly overweight, and my conditioning messages said, people who are overweight aren't actors. Actors are thin, actors are fit, they're beautiful, and they're probably talented,
Mm-hmm.
And when I was told, you can go ahead and be successful on stage, I probably had 85-90% of my conditioned brain saying, there's no way that's you, honey. That's just not going to work out. You're not fit, you're not thin, you haven't done this in probably 20 years, and you haven't had your education, you haven't had your training, so how dare you try? How could you try? You're just going to walk up there and they're going to laugh at you. But fortunately I had made another Sonia's recommendations is that I go to this place called Hoffman. So I marched myself off to Hoffman Institute, which is in California. 90,000 people have gone to this program, and they take the opportunity to kind of, I'd say, remake your authenticity by really getting in touch with who you are, your soul. In every cell of your body, you come back a freshly scrubbed new baby. You get rid of all those bad messages, and you realize who you really are and what you love to do. And I came back from Hoffman, I said, you know what, I'm just going to try out for a community theater play. I figured, I don't care what I look like. I don't care how untrained I am or how bad I am at singing. I'm just going to go in and just give it my all. And I did that. I took the terrifying moment. I stood up in front of like 7 people, and they said, okay, sing something for us. And without any preparation, I started kind of like howl out, wouldn't it be lovely? And I was so scared at the time, Daniel. My hands were shaking so bad. I never had to do this in my life. I had to pin them behind my back so that they would stop making my whole body shake. And I kind of got up there, just threw it out, embarrassed myself to death. But at the end of the day, I was so proud that I showed up, and I just gave it the college try. And, I had the cute little outfit on. I looked the best I could. I then was given another script, and they said, why don't you just read for us? And suddenly some skills just came out of my body. I don't know where they came from, but I started like copying on this Cockney accent, and I just kind of did this whole nice reading for them. And I don't even honestly know where it came from. I thought it was just kind of a gift from above. And they said thank you, and then I went away, and I was so happy that I showed up. I gave it a try. Even if I didn't make it in, I was proud of myself. And I waited, and then I waited. I had to wait some more, and I waited like 7 days, and of course never got the phone call. And I thought, okay, that was just terrible. That was horrible. You were terrible. You need to be better trained, but you're going to show up again next time. And the minute I kind of released into that, I had that serendipity. I had that moment. The phone call rang, that unexpected phone call, and they offered me my first role ever, which was of, townsperson 1. That was my big opening into acting, and I was so happy. It was as if I won the Oscar. That was it. That was, the angels were singing from above, and I walked around and I said, for the next 3 months, I was the happiest person alive because I was an actor, and I made it happen. And it was because I was willing to also get out of my own way, put my ego aside, and I just said, I just want to do this so badly, and it felt so good to get on stage. I lost 30 pounds during the rehearsal period, which is about 3 months, and I had the chance to feel those lights on my face and kind of, swing arms and go dancing up and down the stairs and all the crazy scenes that you have to do for these musical theater. And it was so much fun that I found a part of my authentic self, which had been shut down for about 40 years. And it was so enjoyable that moment, of course, led to another moment, which led to another moment, and now I'm a SAG actor, and I do like 4 and 5 films a year, and so it's great. It's great, but I had to have the tenacity. I had to get out of my own way. I had to stop judging what I was doing and how I was doing it, because it was, I call it profoundly imperfect. Mm-hmm. Everything was profoundly imperfect. But at the end of the day, 10 years later, it's exactly where I want to be.
Now, I know that in the book that you share, as you really were getting into the groove of manifesting. Now, tell us about that, because I think it's interesting that people will take the courses, or, you know, they'll watch The Secret, for instance, over and over and over again, and they can't seem to be able to do what they think this all promises them. But you seem to have found a way. Tell us about how that worked out for you.
Well, I find manifesting, for me, it was almost like playing in the chemistry lab in college, where you have like your Bunsen burner, and then you have some different colored liquids, and you get to put them together and see, you know, if you put them together, sometimes you get some smoke, sometimes you get some liquid out of there, sometimes you get some bad smells, you know. And I truly found manifesting to be one of the most enjoyable games I've ever played. I started to notice that there were certain pieces which were part of a formula, and that's actually going to be part of another whole book that I'm writing about the keys to manifesting and how to actually make it work. When I first started, and I read The Secret, I've read every single solitary book on philosophy, on spirituality, on metaphysics that you can possibly put your hands on. And I, at first, used to think, which I think a lot of people had that expectation after The Secret, you say, I want to have $1 million. I really want $1 million. And you think somehow there's a paper bag that one day you're going to open your door and there's a paper bag with $1 million in it. But it doesn't work like that. It's not about wishing and just boom, something shows up. What I found that there's very specific practices that I would put together that would help me get pretty much whatever I wanted. And when I added that playful aspect and made it a game, they would come even in more quickly and more efficiently. And when I first started, the one thing that I thought that I would experiment with was chocolate, and that's one of the chapters in the book, is that I'm just crazy about chocolate, but it's got to be a certain kind, it's got to be really good. Straight off the plane from France would be perfect for me. You know, the darker, the more Belgium, you know, the more rich. And so I started to practice with, okay, how can I get a box of chocolates? And I used a variety of techniques. And I thought, okay, well, I could go to the store and just go buy it from Godiva, but I thought, no, you know what? I am not going to do that. I'm going to wait and see how long it takes for those chocolates to come to me. And what I ended up doing is I got really clear and really specific. I was thinking about, trying to use all the sensory perceptions, like what are my favorite flavors? So I would imagine myself eating, the dark chocolate one that has the strawberry in the middle, or the one that has the juicy cherry that kind of breaks apart in your mouth and you're completely in heaven for a couple seconds after that burst. And then I started collecting the physical parts of it. I would put together pictures and just kind of put it in some place where I'm not staring at it, but I know that it's there. So the old-time daytimers, you probably remember, we used to have flip pages before we had our iPhones. So I'd put a picture, and then I would put and I would just think about it occasionally, and I would ask, then I would express it outside. I'd use my voice, and I'd stand in the backyard and say, I really am looking forward to this big box of chocolate, and I can't wait till it comes. And then I did the piece that was hardest for me, and that's to release it, to let it go. So I used all the different sensory perceptions, and I put everything, and then I just completely packed it away. I have this little wish box. I would write what I want. I put it in the wish box, close the door, and know that when you close it on this box, the answer is yes. I've already did my part. Now I let the universe deliver. And as you probably know, one of the chapters demonstrates how one day I was in my office just working. The doorbell rings, and it's the delivery guy. And he delivered to me a box of Godiva chocolates. Mm-hmm. And it was my favorite type, and I was kind of looking through it because there was no particular occasion. I wasn't expecting this at all. And I realized after, scrolling through the box that it was really intended for somebody else who used to live in our house.
Ah.
So it really wasn't my box. It was somebody else's box. And her first name was Diana, which is really weird because, my first name is Diane. So I thought, okay, this is really weird. So I had to come clean. I called the people called the company as, I'm sorry, you delivered to the wrong house. And they said, oh, well, thank you so much for letting us know. We'll send another box to that person. Enjoy your chocolates, Diane.
Well, how about that?
Wow. I'm like, and then it took, probably took a few weeks for that to happen, but I couldn't believe it. I was stunned at my own success. I couldn't believe that actually happened just from putting all these pieces together and working with, mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical, putting the 4 quadrants together, and there it was.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of times, too, that people have a challenge manifesting what they want because they put too much emotional energy on the outcome, and you're saying that you shouldn't do that, that you literally just, you think about that desire. Writing it down is always a good thing, and I tend to throw it like on a little 3x5 card. I have little butterfly boxes. It has butterflies because I think of the, the ripple effect of the butterfly, for instance. Throw it in the box and just kind of set it aside, and I don't think much about it after that, as you're suggesting. And it's interesting, every once in a while, and I do mean once in a while, I'll open it up and say, I wonder what some of those cards said at one time. And I'll take a look and realize, well, here's a particular number that I wanted to hit with, for instance, YouTube views. I've exceeded that in the time frame, And these are all things you just kind of, like you said, you just kind of put it aside and you go about life and do what it is that you do. And it's just interesting how all these things really begin to work out. And it's because I think we don't attach a lot of emotional energy to the outcome. Has that been your experience?
There's 2 or 3 perfect tips that you're bringing up. The first tip is writing it down is critical because writing it down is the first physical stage of manifestation. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times people miss that. Your hand on a piece of paper, or if you want to type it, that's fine. But to actually put it down on a piece of paper has brought form to it. So mm-hmm. Form is critical. Your head can bring a lot of things to you, your mind and emotions, but I do find that the physical aspect of it is the very first step. Mm-hmm. The second step that you were discussing, which is also critical, is that, and this is something a lot of people forget, you don't get to, how it shows up, exactly how it shows up, is not in your court. That's in the universe's court. So I coach people, and I've had wonderful people come and say, I really want this job at this pharmaceutical company, and they're located, and this is their name, and that's the job I want. And I always say, well, wait a minute, we got to stop. You are not doing the delivering. The delivering is from the side that we can't see. It's the universe. It's the other side, that smoky part that we can't see beyond this physical plane. I said, so you don't really get to say the job has to be with AbbVie. You get to say, I would really like a company that has to do with healthcare. I'd really like a company that has to do with pharmaceuticals. I'd really like to be in the northern suburbs. I'd really like this. And you get to create what I call your I want list. Mm-hmm. But that I want list has to have the next piece, which is critical, an essence of detachment to the outcome. And that detachment is because everything is happening for you, not to you. So in your best interest, if you'd say, okay, I've got to have this company up here in Northlake, well, that company may not be serving your best interest, so you don't get to be the control freak about the outcome. And so I always try to help people be specific, be completely clear, talk about what it is that is in your everything that is in your yes, I want list, but not have that, not too specific, so that the physical aspect of it doesn't have to be of a critical format. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that's really the tricky part. If I said I wanted the box of chocolate and they had to be a certain type, but I didn't say, the day, the time, and also timing is another thing where I completely let go. The universe has its own time for delivery, and if I say, and I do this all the time, at least once a year, and coming up at the beginning of the year, I create this thing called an I want list. And it's very clear and specific, just what you said, Danielle, about, I'd like, at the time when I was writing the book, I was looking for a publisher, and I wanted the publisher to have these kind of qualities, and I wanted them to, think that, it has an opportunity to be successful, and I wanted all these different things, and I wanted to have so many movies this year and so many this and that. And I also do the same thing you did. Put it away. It's visible, but it's not really visible. It's not staring at you. There's no heaviness to it. And this is one of the years where I checked off. I usually I try to keep my limit to about 3 or 4 major things, because I think I can only craft so many things in a year. And I did everything except 2. And the 2 things that I wasn't able to get this year, one of them I said I wanted an office downtown Chicago, but my subconscious knows that I have kids that are in the suburbs. And I know every time I drive downtown, I'd get the call. I don't have my lunch. Who's going to pick me up? I'm sick. So I think subconsciously I know that office would not serve me. So I didn't get the office because I think we know better sometimes. So you get to put in a couple of things that are a reach or a pull for you, but then you get to also reevaluate later. If you don't get them, the question is, did you really, really want that? And I can almost always say no, or maybe I'm not ready for it now. So intuitively, I also think you back up and support the things that you get, and you also kind of push off the things that aren't quite right.
Right. There's no better evidence about this, I think, than when it comes to, and you certainly had your your challenge with this, and that was developing a new relationship with a partner, because you decided perhaps your marriage wasn't working, and it came to a point where you were single and you were out there. And that certainly was an interesting game in and of itself, wasn't it?
That was definitely interesting. I had the chance to kind of check on Cougar Dating and hang out, go midlife.
Right.
Having been in a relationship for 16 years, it is at first terrifying to say, oh my gosh, how am I going to start dating? I'm 40 years old. Who's going to want to date me? All that kind of stuff. But the funny part, and I will say it was perhaps part of it was the most enjoyable aspect I've had of my entire life when I finally got into it, and I owned the fact that I was free, I could meet new people, I had talk about no attachment. I wanted to go out and play. I didn't want anybody trying to pin me down because I had been tied. I felt like I had been shackled for 16 years, and then I didn't have to have any more kids. So I was walking around not wanting anything specific except to enjoy myself, and I swear it was like being a man magnet, just because there was no attachment, I was light and fun, and I wasn't being all heavy and weird about stuff, and I didn't want anything. I didn't want anything tight. I wasn't looking to get a guy or anything. And I think because that was such a light energy, it just made it really easy to go out and to be asked out on a lot of dates and just go out and have some fun. So that was the positive, heavenly aspect of it. And then I had the, let's say, the darker, more hellish aspect of it when I met somebody who was, without a doubt, probably part of my soul contract to meet. But he also ended up being the most loving person in the world, but he was also the sickest person I've ever met my whole life.
That would be Jeff?
That would be Jeff.
Yes. We'll save that for the readers to encounter as they go through that story, realizing Dianne seems to be very attractive. She seems to be extremely intelligent, also has probably a good sense of reason. Why is she being so unreasonable? But you'll have to discover that when you read it in the real brass ring. I just like the way your friend put it. But, it really brought up something fascinating, though, and that is that heartfelt need to maybe try to correct course in others, without really realizing that's what you think you're doing. And sometimes you really have to step out of someone else's way, as Ilana Van Zandt had said once. Sometimes people are on their own way, and in the meantime, what you need to do is get out of that way so that they can do that. But a lot of times we really want to hold on to that, thinking we're going to be able to change that, hence the women who love bad boys.
Yet, the bad boys seem to be probably, and by far Jeff is one of my greatest lessons of my entire life, was to see the dark side of life, to see everything that made no sense to me, to see everything I'd never experienced or wanted to experience or ever thought I'd be involved in those horrible parts of life that that you only see on TV. Oh, that's the bad stuff for soap operas, you know. And then to take someone like me to walk right through it was by far a shock, like you said, to everyone I knew, but also to myself, because I was like, I couldn't believe that I would go that far. And what I learned through it, though, is that this is being one of the biggest lessons, is that I have a circle. And I think we all maybe intuitively know this, but because of our subconscious, because of the lessons we have to learn, I felt like not only did I have my circle, I was going to take care of your circle too, Daniel. I was going to take care of everybody else's circle. And I was in, and this might also be kind of the, you know, the adult children of alcoholics, you know, the CODA message is that a lot of us are trained, especially when we have really unhappy childhood or we had a very unsafe experience growing up, that we can manage all this. I can manage your circle. I can make you happy. I can make sure I don't even know who you're in a relationship with, but if I meet them, I'll make them happy. And if I'm doing speaking or whatever, I'm going to make sure the person in the front row is happy. And so I really had a bad case of not managing my own circle. And I learned that not only did I have such a blind side to this, but I had such a weakness. I think I literally just threw on a nurse's outfit, put on the little hat, put on the little sensible white shoes like they used to have, you know, walking around. And I was going to make sure everybody else was perfectly fine, and I could not only make sure they're okay, but I could save them. And so I had that in spades. This I'm going to save everybody, save Jeff, save my kids, save even the ex at the time. And I had to learn the hard lesson that there was only one circle I could manage. I couldn't manage the others, but also the third circle, which of course is the universe's circle. Somehow I actually kind of thought that I could probably take care of that as well. And I really got more specific, as you had mentioned, since that time, ending that relationship, and taking the break, the real break, to learn who I was and to get back in touch with that critical aspect of self-love. When you really love yourself, you will let other people do their own thing, because it's more loving to let them have their own course and to follow their own sacred contracts than it is for you to try to get in and rescue them. And I finally had to learn that those boundaries are very fixed for me, and I had to really respect them. And now when I see addictions walking my way, I can pick it up in about 1 second. I can hear the crazy talk. I can respond to it. I can see what's happening, and I can allow that person to have their own path, and they don't have to intersect into mine in such an unhealthy way.
Mm-hmm. You know, and it's also a fascinating lesson, too, on, you know, how sneaky codependence can be. And I kept thinking as I was reading in that particular chapter about a movie titled Clean and Sober starring Michael Keaton. And there was that scene with M. Emmett Walsh where apparently there was a woman that he had met through this program that he was in to become clean and sober, is that she ended up getting into a car crash apparently on the way to his house, and she dies. And, you know, he kind of shows up on his doorstep, and this other guy is his sponsor. And he says, you know, to believe that you can control somebody else's addiction just shows how warped your thinking really is. And that was so true, you know, that when we think we can control, especially someone else who has an addiction, you know, the idea that we're going to help steer them in the right direction is really warped on our part, not theirs, but on ours. It's as though we're taking on their problem and owning it as though it's ours.
And I think it's all in an attempt to save.
Right.
I really thought I could save his life, or I had to be a part of saving his life, which is kind of course, crazy when you stand back from it. That's crazy talk.
Sure.
Everyone is responsible for their own life, but the addictions are super sneaky, as you had mentioned. And I do believe a lot of that goes back to, again, I always kind of, I have a tendency to kind of go back to, my original background was in psychology and philosophy, decided not to pursue that, became a marketeer and became an expert in marketing. But when I go back to like Piaget and I look at the stages of development, I really think maybe some of us missed some of the basics of the main stages of development, because you don't even have, when you're really young, if you do, and I had a very chaotic, you know, kind of a scary, difficult background because we moved every 3 years. So I'm not sure I learned during that period. I think until you become 12, you don't even have formal operations. You cannot really manipulate and do abstract thinking. So what you're taking in all the time is what you see is real, what people are saying. If they even call you a name, that is you, that defines you. And I think because of my chaotic background, I really thought that I could fix things. If I keep everything calm, then there won't be any rage. If I keep everything, if I do this and this and this, maybe we won't move again. If I do this, maybe this person will stay my friend. So it was this constant manipulation to keep an environment, loving. And I think that's where a lot of us get, and we can't help it because we were kind of programmed growing up, but I think that's where a lot of it comes from. You actually do believe that your manipulation is going to get you love.
Mm-hmm. Or create stability, as I was mentioning earlier.
Yes.
Because,
exactly.
see, you were a lot like I was in the first several years of my life, where I moved literally every year to 2 years. I was in a different school every year up until the 6th grade. And I took a look at, as I was reading that, I said, this kind of resonates with me. I could understand what it is to be in a new place. You've now got to deal with a different set of rules, a different set of personalities. And really you start to lose yourself in that, of that stability of who am I and how would I be in an environment that seems to be repetitive, seems to be something I'm used to. A community, for instance, those things we might long for through the Hollywood scene, for instance, of that little community where everybody knows each other, and the one story gets across town within minutes. And so you begin to create these pseudo-realities to create that stability, especially as a child, that you're yearning for. And therefore, when you really get into your adult world, maybe that gets put behind or, kind of into the subconscious, as you were mentioning earlier. Then when you begin to pursue what you think is going to make you happy, you realize you're just repeating the same kind of patterns that you've learned to grow up with to create that sense of stability, as you were talking about in the first place.
And I often wonder if individuals, it sounds like we have a similar background with the frequent moving. My theory is, I don't know if this is totally correct, but I believe maybe I never learned object permanence, which is one of the basic phases when you grow up. That having never had the community consistent, friend base consistent, location consistent, and all those that eventually, especially when especially girls a little younger, but, let's say 10, 11, 12 for boys or girls, they need to know that community and that friendship base is consistent because it's really what's driving your self-esteem. And when you're constantly having to come into a new environment, I think it really throws that for a loop because then object permanence becomes an issue oftentimes into adult life. Because they're just going to leave, or you subconsciously were thinking, they're just going to leave, that's going to leave, it all just ends. Not that things don't really have cycles, but that becomes more of an issue. So I was kind of laughing. I'm like, I'm not sure I got object permanence as a baby. I think maybe I missed one of the major stages of development, but it does make us very social.
So tell us, what do you consider to be the real brass ring?
The real brass ring, in my opinion, is knowing that you have two phenomenal opportunities for yourself. One is to pursue your life's work, whatever that might be. And the second is to know that through your life's work, you will be joyously fulfilled, you will be incredibly satisfied, and every day gives you that uplifting high in a way of being so happy that you're doing something that makes you feel 100% fulfilled. And the brass ring aspect of that is knowing that you need to look at opportunities, hear, see, and notice opportunities that are coming your way that is pretty much synchronicity coming true. It's that one opportunity where you might have said no, but you say yes. And I have several examples in the book when I had an opportunity, for example, when I was first trying to become a professional actor, I got I really thought that nobody in the world would ever pick me up because I really didn't have a background. I didn't have a resume. I didn't have really a lot of experience. And so I kept firing all these packages out, and I was rejected by everybody in the city of Chicago as far as an agent was concerned, until the one day that I get the phone call. I go running downtown, and the woman said, if you're willing to be part of our website, we're going to represent you. And I knew that that situation was backwards, that normally I'm not supposed to have to pay to get an agent. But I recognized it. I literally almost saw like a real brass ring coming my way saying, this is an opportunity. Someone has said, it's kind of coming in the window instead of the door. They said, we're going to let you in the window right now, and if you're willing to say yes and put this little bit of investment down, you've got it. And so I said, I was like, yes, absolutely. I'll pay you to be my agent. And then 2 weeks later, I got my first commercial. So had I not said yes to that, had I not been present to it, had I not been aware that this was opportunity knocking, I could have very easily walked away and said, no, this doesn't fit the right mold. This isn't exactly the way it's supposed to be. I'm going to walk away. So it's seeing those opportunities, recognizing them, and going 100% forward with as much enthusiasm as you can. Mm-hmm. And that's how I define the real brass ring.
Very exciting to know that we're not identifying a brass ring that somebody else tells us is good for us. Tell us about a website people can find out about how they can live their everything.
Well, that is the website name, so
pretty
thank
close.
you. The website is called liveyoureverything.com, and as part of this journey, as part of this 10-year journey, I want to set up a sanctuary for individuals that is for midlife rebooting. And this sanctuary is for transformation, and one of the goals of it, liveyoureverything.com, is as it grows, it's still new and developing, but I want to be able to put out products for health, wellness, anti-aging, beauty, and just well-being. Anything that works and helps you feel better about yourself, inspired, or motivated to do what you came here to do is what the website's all about.
Mm-hmm. And it reminds us that it's never too late to go in and bravely embrace our full potential and live to our heart's desire just as you've done. And I always say that, people get so concerned about achievement, that there's a possibility of failure, so they never really step in that direction just to find out what the outcome may be. And I've always said, or I shouldn't say always, but certainly in the years of doing this program and meeting and talking with such dynamic people like yourself, Dianne, is that if you get out there and just do it, it doesn't matter whether you succeed or you fail, you're a success because you truly just decided to go do it. And I think that's the key, Find out if maybe you'll fail and get ridiculed, but realize that you have the courage to do it in the first place. Anybody can be a critic.
Absolutely.
And I know that you know that better than anyone in your business.
And also, the trick to that is time is really, the linear aspect of time is really man-made. It doesn't matter how long you're pursuing your heart's desire or your life's work. It just matters that you have pursued it. Mm-hmm. And so it could be 1 minute, or it could be a lifetime. And I actually asked Sonia that question because I said to her, what happens if I don't get the real brass ring? And she said, if you don't do it, she said, you're going to have to go back and come and do it again. And I'll tell you what, it was the do it again part that got me moving because I'm like, oh no, oh no way, not me. And I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm going to do everything you said, and it was because I did also ask her the part B of that question was, I said, do you ever talk to people, let's say, who are significantly, significant in years or are sick or whatever, and they ask you, what is my life's past? What is my life's work? And you know that they're not going to be able to do it. And she said, sadly, sometimes she will have someone that is just at the ending phase, and she tells them the same message. It is not how long you've done it. It's that you have done it. So in whatever time you have left, it is an opportunity for you to get clear, get specific, get heart-driven, have that inner light that kind of shines when you ever talk to someone about stuff they love. Their little eyes just kind of start beaming, and you can see all these lights go off, and everybody looks so much happier and elated. She said, that's what matters. You could do it for 1 second. You could do it for a lifetime. Of course, it's better to do it for a lifetime, but that 1 second counts.
And it should. And I love the fact that you brought up the point that time is linear according to a man-made manifestation, that it could happen in the next second or it could take years before it does happen. But as long as you're going in that direction, again, that journey really truly is the reward.
Yes, it is.
And that one journey our listeners can take is by journeying to your website, which is liveyoureverything.com. Find out where you can get the real brass ring. Dianne, thank you so much for being on the program today. Any parting thoughts you'd like to leave with our listeners?
Yes, I would like to share. So for anyone who's ever feels lost or unfilled, or they feel like perhaps they're stuck, they don't wake up feeling energized and enthusiastic, it's important to know that you can always grab at the real brass ring, and you can start your reboot, whether it's a midlife reboot, whether it's an early life reboot, or whether it's a towards the end of your life reboot. You can always grab at the real brass ring. And the real brass ring, just so that you know, it is available on Amazon.com. It's also available on BarnesandNoble.com. And I hope that everybody can take this as an opportunity to take a look at your life and do exactly what it is that you love to do. No
matter how crazy it seems.
Exactly.
Dianne, thank you so much for joining us here on Beyond 50.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It's my pleasure.
Again, the book is The Real Brass Ring. Our guest today, Dianne Bischoff James. You can find out more. Visit us at Beyond50Radio.com. That is the number 50. I'm Daniel Davis. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Beyond 50 Radio program. And remember, live your day past halfway.